Hello, I'm Philip Hughes, Chair of the Maroondah Interfaith Network. Coming out of lockdown from COVID-19, we've been holding a series of seminars on the sort of community we want to build. The final seminar in our series was held as a dinner on the 28th of March 2021, celebrating Harmony Day. 74 religious leaders and representatives of religious communities gathered for the dinner. The theme was building community across the barriers which divide us. Religious groups generally do well in gathering people across the barriers of age, gender, education, and sometimes ethnicity. However, we need other organisations, such as the interfaith networks, to build community across the barriers of religion and creed. The evening began with some classical Indian dancing of the Kathak style, reflecting both Muslim and Hindu elements, and reflecting a time when Muslims and Hindus sought to live together harmoniously. Central to the evening was a Q&A session with speakers who've been involved with our seminar series. Present at the dinner were Rev Glenn Loughrey, an author and artist, and vicar of St Oswald's Anglican Church, Glen Waverley, and a member of the Anglican Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission. Rev Scott Hawkins, a pastor and leader at UrbanLife in Ringwood, whose community has been involved in many community building projects, and he sees himself as a community curator. And Swami Sunishthananda from the Vedanta Mission, which has its base in East Ringwood. the Swami is a well-known teacher and source of much wisdom. Questions were prepared for these speakers by the various tables at the dinner, and the session was chaired by Norm Curry.
But one of the things that I noticed that we do, and we're going to talk about harmony, and I may not get to talk about this later, but you do acknowledgements of country, you take part in welcomes of country. The reason why we have harmony amongst the 250 different faith groups that make up Aboriginal Australia, and you need to understand that Wiradjuri is very different to Wurundjeri, which is very different to Yolngu, which is very different to Yorta Yorta. We have all different ways of seeing and speaking and being. We are not the same. So there are 250 different faith or national groups. And if you then add in the 600 or so dialects on top of that, you have variance inside that. How did we maintain harmony? We did it because of the acknowledgement of country and the welcome of country. What does that mean? Those two documents are legally binding documents that are designed on the custodial ethic, which means when you're on somebody else's land, you live out of their culture, you live out of their way of seeing, or in terms of us, you're not out of their faith, you don't impose yours, you live under the law in that land. And the people whose land you're on must include you in that, provide you with everything you need, and it's a legally binding contract. That's what harmony for us means. And we do it every day. People do acknowledgement of countries before the football kicks off, somewhere between the first announcement and the smoking. And we don't really know what it is. If we're going to have harmony, that's how Aboriginal people do it. And as people on our land, that's what we expect. And it's an important thing. The other comment I was going to make is not interested in reconciliation. It's got nothing to do with me. You are the lot that have to do the reconciliation. Because it's the people who stole the land and who live off the proceeds of stolen property that need to reconcile within themselves the actions that brought Aboriginal people to this place. It's nothing to do with us. Okay, so these are all interesting things, but I wanted to say a couple of those things because they're said very quickly and we take them for granted. Reconciliation as a project today is a project of assimilation. It's not a project of equity. Sorry, Norm.
No, please keep that. Well, that was well worth saying, because it is all about what we're on about, really. Now, I've got a bunch of cards here. I've got 9 cards, in fact. I don't know whether we're going to get through them or not. However, this is, and I think we should nominate the table. This is table number 1, those intelligent looking people there. And they say, how can 2 groups bridge a barrier if one group thinks drinking is good and another one thinks it's bad? How do you do that? Now that's a good question for Australia, because drinking is the habit of quite a few people. What's that? Who's going to leap up with that one? The question I asked. The question. Yeah.
Not going to drink it.
How can 2 groups bridge a barrier if one group thinks drinking is bad and the other group cannot socialise without it?
So every religion has 2 aspects. The one is the social aspect. The other is the spiritual aspect. Yeah, sometimes when we are meeting with the other people, if we can just accept the social difference and just allow the people to be what they are, there is no harm in somehow interrelating with each other in the spiritual manner. And there we will find we all have some common grounds to empathize. So though we are in the same room, the one who just feel that the drink without drinking, they cannot socialize, they can have it. The one who thinks it is something beyond their norms, they can still have their group. But when we are having the discussion, so just as here we are having so many tables. Yes, there may be some tables where the drinking is okay, there are others where it's not okay. But when you are having a discussion, all can listen to it, and that speaks of the spiritual aspect where we all relate. So I don't think that there had to be a very watertight segregated compartment if we have the understanding that as per our background, we have some social norms, and that is also a part of religion. We did not have to think of try to equalize in that level. Let it be as it is. But if we go to the spiritual tradition, you will find there is a wonderful this harmony in all the religions. Just to give a common example, that any religion believes in the spiritual dimension of existence, and in that last 1 year we found when we were coping with the COVID, this spiritual dimension helps us to cope with the crisis in a much better way, whatever faith we belong to. When you can relate to some dimension of existence which is beyond this so-called flow, that God is, I am, or those who don't believe in God, that something is there which continues. As eternal laws, in Buddhism they speak of the law which is something eternal. So something is there which continues, which is beyond this existence, and when we relate to that, we find it becomes very easy to cope with the challenges of life. A few days back I was seeing one TED talk, very interesting. The first question they asked, that what is truth? For thousands of years, all the cultures had a belief in God. And now in the modern science, we say without reason we don't accept anything. Those cultures, the indigenous culture, for 60,000 years, there is an uninterrupted culture with a belief in God and traditions, they were existing. And with all our rational science, in 200, 300 years, we are at the brink of annihilation. So what is truth? If you keep the benchmark that yes, our existence is which counts as the truth, they have already proven that for 60,000 years they were existing very peacefully with the nature. And now with all our science, with all our technology, in 200, 300 years we are at the brink of annihilation. So when we say what is truth, first we have to fix the benchmark, and then let us define the truth. And you will find that all those cultures have something to say which we have to inculcate, which are some perennial values. And that in this type of gathering, we will find that irrespective of the fact that we may have some social differences, in spite of that fact, we can all relate to that spiritual dimension. And that's how this type of gathering is something which is possible and which should be there more and more. That's what I do. Thank you.
Now this is something that maybe up your path, Glenn, and the question is, how can we use art form from different faiths and traditions to promote harmony in communities?
When you have a title, people think you actually know something about it. And just because I'm an artist doesn't mean I know about the theory. I think art's a very important sense of language. It's a universal language, and the practices of art in the various different cultures and groups are important, as we saw tonight with the art of dance. It opens up for us a window into how other people think, see, feel and act. And I think art plays a very important role in doing that. I use art inside schools with students as young as 4 to help them to explore their own identity, or their own sets of song lines, which are really just another way of saying learning points in life, the journey on which you travel. So I think art's very important, and I think the variety of art, we live in a very blessed time when you can go on the internet and you can explore the art from very many different backgrounds. The other thing though about it is that people refer to me as an Aboriginal artist, which makes me sound like an artist but not quite a real one. So I prefer to be known as a contemporary Australian artist, and a contemporary Australian artist picks up from all the cultures that are here. Picks up ideas, shapes, stories that make up our country, so that people who come from different cultures can look at my art and see their own story, see their own song line in it. And I think it's really an important part, an important tool to get us talking. And I just recently took part in the Blake Art Prize, which is spiritual but not Christian or any particular type of Christianity or any type of faith really. And there were many different varieties of art depicted in that competition, and they touched on the very many different cultures in this country, all speaking to social justice and spiritual matters. And I think that's really important. It helps us to see the kaleidoscope of colours that make up who we are.
The next question, and Scott's got the microphone there, so maybe
make it an easy one.
And so this is, first of all, it's a suggestion. Every faith-based group should celebrate at least one holy day of another group.
Good. Is that the question, or is that the question mark at the end?
I just left it hanging out there.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, so that is the question. I was waiting for the follow-up part.
There's no follow-up. I'll give you the follow-up. What does the panel think about this?
1, 2, 3. Good. First of all, thank you for your welcome, and I would like to add my acknowledgement of all Indigenous elders, past, present, and emerging. And I want to also add to the acknowledgement too that we have an all-female Maroondah Mayor, Vice Mayor at the moment. I think that is fantastic. That's the first time that I've heard an all-female team, and that we weren't all meant to be male on this panel either. If it wasn't for COVID, we would have had a more diverse group up here too. Yes, I wholeheartedly agree for so many different reasons, and but I do understand why it is hard for some communities to come at that. When a faith tradition bases itself around fear, there's fear of conversion. There's fear of that if I open myself up to something, that something somehow mysteriously bad will happen. There's spiritual fear. There's all kinds of fear that enters into that, and I'm not immune to that fear, but that's a fear that we need to overcome with love every single day. And I think if we can put ourselves in a place, if we can take ourselves out of a place of conversion and put ourselves into a place of learning, I think that becomes much, much easier and a much more harmonious place for us to be in as well. So yes, I would agree, and I'm sure there are some traditions which might feel a lot more familiar, and some that would be a lot more foreign, and I guess that depends on how much you're prepared to jump in the deep end. But yes, I would agree wholeheartedly with more than just a good.
That was good. The next question, and you can pass the microphone to whenever you like, because it's a fairly difficult one. Given the oneness of humanity, what is the main point that a person has to realise so that they can come to an understanding of that oneness? And how does that change the way we live? So So that's a really across this panel question. Oneness.
So the oneness is the thing where all the mystic tradition of the world, they speak the same language. You will find a very interesting thing. In all the religion, as per the doctrines and dogmas are concerned, there is a lot of fight. But if you listen to the language of the mystics, they are all speaking the same language. Why you know? Just a common example. Suppose I have tasted the mango and I come and just address a group of people who have not tasted the mango. And I say, mango is very sweet and it has a nice flavor. Now all will think I understand why they try to relate those words with their available fund of experience. Everyone has tasted something sweet, everyone has smelled something which has nice flavor, so they will start relating with their intellect. Some will say the mango is as sweet as molasses and it is having a nice flavor, most probably like jasmine flower. Someone will say it is as sweet as honey and it has some, what you say, that a flavor like rose. So here what is happening, those words all are trying to understand intellectually and there is tremendous fight. All are having these varied opinions. Among those, one tests the man. Immediately he will understand the words which has been told is correct, but we have not experienced it. And that's why the fight. When we have not, there cannot be any knowledge unless you experience. With words we can have never any knowledge. We have to experience. And all the religion actually speaks of experiencing the truth. But somehow we are satisfied with the beliefs. We never go for that experiential dimension of our religion. The more we can go there, you will find that all are speaking the same language. There all the difference falls off. I have heard a very nice story. That the story goes like this in a small way, that the God incarnated and he was speaking out the truth to all. Now Satan's followers, they got concerned. They ran to Satan and told, most probably your reign is over. God has incarnated and he is speaking out the truth. Satan was not at all perplexed. He was sitting in his throne, relaxed. And then he told, you're all full. Go and have an intent look. Who are all surrounding the prophet or the one who is speaking the truth? Who are all surrounding? You go and see. They're all my followers. After hearing, when they start preaching, my work will be done. And that's what happens when we try to understand religion intellectually. If you really try to understand the oneness, listen to the language of the mystic. They're all speaking the same language. In Islam, the Sufism, they speak of the same Vedanta language. You go to the Christian mystics, Meister Eckhart, we feel as if he's speaking the Vedanta. All the mystics, those who have went to that experiential level, they're all speaking the same language. And once you go there, the problems are solved. In a short way, we can say how the problems are solved. Swami Vivekananda is giving a very nice example that he was passing as a parivrajak, as a wandering monk, he was passing through the desert. He was very thirsty. So he was in search of water and suddenly he saw a huge reservoir at a distance. He started approaching and he found he never reaches it, and after some time it vanishes. And then that realization comes. From childhood I have read in the textbook about mirage. For the first time I am experiencing it. What's the result? Next day when again I am walking through the desert, again I am thirsty, again I see the reservoir. But there's a big difference. Yesterday it dragged me. Today it has lost the power to drag me. I know it's just a projection. That one is the reality, everything is a projection. When that comes as a realization, you transcend the dualities of existence, and that gives you a tremendous joy of freedom, which all the religion speaks of. You go to the mystic tradition, you will find it is the same language. In the words of Ramakrishna, very nicely used to say, there, and so we go to that realization, all the fox howls in the same manner. So I think that's the thing which all the tradition speaks of. If you go to the mystics, language of the mystics, you find they speak of that unity, and that's the only thing which can resolve the so-called the limitations which we have as a human in our existence. So that's what it is.
Thank you, sir.
In terms of oneness for Aboriginal people, it's called, it's the reason why I said that I'm indigenous of the universe, but in Wiradjuri embedded at birth, it's the universal and the particular. But remember, in an Aboriginal language, because there's 250 plus nation groups, our idea of the universe is localised. We don't know about India. It's not included in our universe. Our universe is what we see from horizon to horizon, sky to soil around us. And that's why we don't have a God in the sense that you speak about God. We have creator beings in our own particular environment, and that can be by army for me at Wiradjuri, Bumjul here in Kulin Nations. But they are localised. They're not in this sense that you speak of God in the universe in that way. The universe is in a sense localised. My culture, we don't have a word for shark, because he'd rub his belly out on the Darling River. There's no sharks there, so we don't have a word for it. We don't have a God in the way that you understand God, or a universal being that is for everybody. It's for us, for our localised area. So being indigenous of the universe also means, well, that means for us in terms of oneness, is that we're at one with every sentient creature or creation, be it rock, be it animate or inanimate, human or inhuman, unhuman, non-human, whatever the word is. But it is that sense that we are connected to each one of those, and they all have a sentience, a capacity to be themselves and to respond. That's why you have to know which rock to pick up, because if you take the wrong rock away, you will suffer and you'll have to bring it back. Go out to Ayers Rock, and out Uluru, when it was Ayers Rock, people used to take rocks away. They've had to return them. Some rocks don't mind travelling, others don't. They want to stay right where they are. So you have to understand these things, and it's a relationship of oneness with all the creation, which is why we had 140,000 years of harmony with nature, because we didn't see them separate to us. So that's how we understand being united or being one.
That is really such an important question. I think, Scott, if you'd like to have a go on it, the rest of the questions, I'm sorry, we'll have to sacrifice those, I think. But why don't you have a talk about oneness, Scott?
There are lots of ways of achieving oneness, and so I either love the idea of oneness or hate it, depending on how we achieve it. If oneness was to be achieved by the lowest common denominator of what we have in the room here, that would be, for me, that would be pretty weak. If we could only move forward with what we had 100% agreement with, then it would not be sufficient for me. And then there's another kind of oneness where you take the richness and the fullness of everything and then put it in a blender and turn it into one of those juices that muscly people drink for breakfast, and they always seem to be green and disgusting. And when it's all mashed up together, it's just gross for me. And it would be the same if that was how we were going to describe our oneness here in the room, was just to take everything that is us and then just mash it all in. But where it can be celebrated, where it can be seen, where it can be, where we can admire and learn from and engage with each other's differences, and not feel like we need to attack each other for them or blend them down or not speak about them because it wouldn't be polite in this room, then I can celebrate that kind of a oneness, one where everyone's differences and everyone's colours can be seen and enjoyed and learnt from. That's the kind of oneness that I would eagerly participate in. So it depends on what kind of oneness.
What kind of oneness? And I just looked at the question for table 8. Would it be easier if communities focused on becoming unified rather than focusing on religious differences? Which,
well, if I can say, table 8 was a very intelligent table.
oh, I didn't know.
He was sitting at the table when he wrote that question.
I didn't write the question. In fact, they deliberately wrote that question to stump me on the panel. And again, I would say, if easy was what we were looking for, if that was the outcome we were hoping for, tonight we would have all had cheese on toast instead of a selection of meals. If the goal of harmony is easy, then it's pretty bland, and it's not much fun for me. But if the goal is to be able to learn from and celebrate the difference, then that's something I could enjoy. There you go.
What he's talking about is the difference between oneness and conformity. You know, if we all conform to the lowest common denominator that everybody is happy with, that's not oneness, that's not unity, that's not being united. Being united means that we come together, hold of what was important to us, embrace what's important to others, think about it, dialogue, yarn, give it a chance to percolate and become something that we can all hold on to. It's not about melting it down, it's about building it up. And it's about giving it a power and a strength to give us possibilities. So that's what I was hearing, Scott, and it's not about conformity. It's not about everybody conforming to the lowest common denominator.
A huge and overwhelming applause is appropriate, I think. Thanks very much. Thanks, guys.
The evening concluded with some classical Indian songs and with an ancient Aboriginal fire blessing.